Okay, great. All right. Once again, for the recording, I'm going to step through this warm up how I would attack this. And as I go, I'm going to like point out a couple things that I saw and some things that I didn't see, and ask me questions as we go. So the first thing I see is I need to create a method. Okay, cool. So I create a method with def some method name and end. That's like the thing that I need to create a method. So I definitely want to have that. And if I look at this little like interaction pattern, I've called this method stringify. You can call it whatever you want, but since I already decided to call it stringify, that's what I'm going to do. So I need to create a method. Cool. So check. This method needs to take an argument that is an array of integers. So my method is going to take some argument. It says it's going to be an array of integers. So I'm going to call this argument numbers. I'm expecting an array of integers, so I'm going to call this something that indicates that it is some sort of list of numbers. All right, cool. And then I need it to return an array of those integers as strings, and I must use each. So I need to return these numbers as strings. So in my method, I must use each. And because I must use each, and I'm trying to get something other than just the original array, I need some sort of placeholder or accumulator to hold on to my stringified numbers. So I'm just going to call this number strings. Naming is hard. I'm going to set that equal to an empty array. And then I'm going to take my array of numbers and call each on that array. And for each number, and I'm just going to use the shorthand num because I'm lazy, I want to shovel that number as a string, 2s, into my number strings array. I want to end this. And oops. And remembering that each returns the original array, I need to tell my method to return my number strings so that I could call this stringify somewhere down here. We'll like print it out so I can see the result of this and run, not test, run this. Okay, cool. And I get my array of strings. So this is how I would do it. I saw a few other things that I just wanted to make note of. I saw some folks doing something like this, where we had an array equal to like 1, 2, 3 above. And then inside of this method, they were calling like array dot each. And I just want to show that that does give us a scope issue. Excuse me, I think I might sneeze. No, maybe not. Oh, sorry, it's giving us a wrong number of arguments. But if we run it the way that we designed it, we're getting this undefined local variable or method array. So we can't pull this global local variable into our method local variable. So just that's one piece to note. If we want to like send something into a method, unless it's an instance variable, we need to give it this argument. Numbers. Okay, cool. I also saw, let me just get back to this. I also saw a lot of this, which is a super common mistake. And what will happen here is instead of getting an array of strings, we're getting an array of integers still. Because what does each return? The original array. each returns the original array, so we must return the accumulator where we've like stored that value that we want. And then I did see some of this, which this runs and we get still that array of integers. Like nothing wrong is happening, there's no error, but it's not doing what we want. We're simply like converting the number to a string and then doing nothing with it. Okay, so in this case, we both need to like capture that value somewhere. So we need somewhere to capture that new value. And we need to then return that captured information at the end of our method. Jahar, did you have a question?
So I did it in a REPL, and I have something similar to yours. And I want to know, why does it not actually work if you put puts in front of number strings on line 7?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question.
It's offensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what if instead of simply returning this value, what if our method actually outputs it to the terminal? And then we try and like puts the method again. Is this sort of what you have, Jahara? Oh, I can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, surprise. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, mine looks just like that.
Okay, great. So let's like walk through what's happening. So when we try and print the return value of stringify 1, 2, 3, what's going to happen is Ruby will run this method, and this method in and of itself also outputs to the terminal. So first we see the output of 1, 2, 3, and then we see nil. So as we're running this method, Ruby is putsing this array, and puts an array is a little funky because it puts it like vertically instead of horizontally, whatever. But the tricky piece about this is the return value of puts is nil. So now the last line of our method is basically returning nil, because what we're doing is putsing instead of just allowing the accumulator to be the return value. And because the return value of puts is nil, it's making the return value of the method nil. Does that answer your question?
Yep, 100%. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and this is also a thing that we see all the time, where students are like, why is it not working? It's because this stupid puts. Yeah, so that's a fun time. Yeah, Kevin.
So is p or print a safer output command than puts? Because puts and p are kind of similar, but should we avoid puts?
Yeah. Oh, gosh, what is the right way to answer this question? So the return value of puts is nil. The return value, I'm just going to say that the return value of p is whatever was output. Is one safer than the other? I don't know about this word safer. What I will say is that there is a big difference between the return value of a method and anything you want to output to a terminal. So most of the time, especially once you get out of mod 1, you will not be outputting things to a terminal. So what I would say is that for the next 6 weeks, you may have methods that output things to the terminal, but then after that, you probably will never. So one is not safer or less safe than the other, but it is important to know like what they do, what their return value is. Yeah. Generally, I would try not to puts or print from a method. You definitely will do it in mod 1, but I would try and minimize it as much as possible. Did that answer your question? That might have just like created more questions than answers.
Nope, that was good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so in this case, I would not print or puts in my method. I would just print the return value of the method. All right, any other questions about this warm up? I'll move this note down here. Oops. Okay. Kevin, did you have another question, or is your hand just still up? Yeah, no worries. Okay, cool. So I'm glad we went through that warm up. Let's go ahead and let's see, we started at 10:20. Yeah, we're gonna keep going. Oh yeah, Jahara.
Is today's lesson beginner enumerables in the lessons in the module?
It is Enumerables 1, I think. Let me, yeah, sorry, I'm not super great at like remembering to post the lesson. Yeah, it's
Jahara, I just put
Enumerables
it in the
1.
chat for you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, cool. Yeah, I will probably, I may veer off the lesson plan a little bit, but yes, that is generally what we are doing. All right, cool. Okay, so let's dive into this whole like enumerables thing. So we have used each, and just a reminder that each is used to iterate over collections. So like a little bit of a recap. Each is used to iterate over collections. And a reminder that collections are arrays or hashes, also some other things. We're still going to focus on arrays here. We'll deal with hashes next week. And when we have arrays, when we have collections that we need to iterate over, we're generally trying to do one of three things. So we usually iterate to accomplish one of the following. We often need to transform the elements of a collection, which is actually what we're doing in this stringify example. We're changing or transforming our number to something else and storing that as like a new array. We often need to get a subset of a collection based on specific criteria. So that would be like if I wanted to get only the odd numbers, or only the even numbers, or only the numbers that start with a T. I don't know. If I want to get like a smaller section, a smaller collection, I want to get a subset. And then the third thing that we generally do is like create a new thing. So think about this as like creating a sum. I'm going to sum some numbers. I'm going to interpolate my collection into a string. I'm going to create a new collection. Yeah, I'm going to create a new thing. So these are the three things that we typically do. And there are some types of operations that are so common that Ruby and some other languages have developed specific iterating tools that we can use to do these specific tasks. And those tools are called enumerables. Enumerables. So specific methods, tools that we use to accomplish iterative tasks. Key word here is specific. These tools accomplish a specific goal. And so it's important to understand, like, when should I use this tool? When should I not? When should I use each? When should I use an enumerable? We're going to talk about 3 enumerables today. We're going to talk about map, find, and find all. We are probably only going to cover in lessons 6 or 7 enumerables, but there are many. There are many, many enumerables, and they all do a very specific job. As you learn about enumerables, there's like 3 things that I generally think about when I'm thinking about an enumerable. There is the syntax, you got to know how to write it. The return value, you got to know what is going to be spit out the other end of that enumerable. And then there are often some gotchas that you need to like figure out, work around, learn about. And so we're going to go over those 3 things for those 3 enumerables today: map, find, and find all. Let's see, is there anything else that I want to say about that? I don't think so. I think we're ready to go. Let's see, we started at 10:20, we've been going for a little while, so let's go ahead and take a quick palm, and we will come back at 10:52. 10:52, we will be back. All right. And super fun times. I forgot to stop the recording during that POM. So there you go. Now you have a recording POM. But at least I'm still recording. Okay. So yes. Okay, great. So before the POM, we sort of did a little recap of each and talked about like what is an enumerable. And now let's dive in and let's learn about some. So the first one I want to talk about is map. So map is an enumerable that we use used when we need to transform or change every element in a collection. Yeah, so we use map anytime we need to transform or change every element in a collection. The syntax is relatively straightforward. If we do a little Ruby snippet in here, we are going to call map on like an array. Actually, I'll call this collection because we can call it on any kind of collection. And just like each, map takes a block. So it has a do and an end. And also like each, we want to give it a block variable. So that block variable is going to represent the element that we are iterating over. And then inside of the block, we do the transforming. Whatever code we need to accomplish the transforming, we put it inside the block. I'm also going to put here, this is the code that will, nope, I'm not going to put that yet. Yeah, this is where we do the transforming. And then the return value of map is an array of the same length as the original array. Key piece here is that it will be the same length as the original array. So the return value of map will always be an array of the same length as the original array. Okay.
Can you
Let's-
just,
oh.
hi. Can
No,
you
go
just
for it.
quickly, when you say length, you mean like character length, right?
Number of elements.
Number of elements, thank you.
Yeah. The same number of elements as the original array. So if we run map on an array of 30 things, we're going to get an array of 30 things. If we run it on an array of 50 things, we're going to get an array of 50 things. Map will always give us an array of the same number of elements or length. Great question. All right, cool. So let's see it in action. And we've actually got a good example right here. This stringify problem is a map problem. We are trying to transform every single value in an array to something else. So what would this look like with map? And I'm actually just going to, I'm just going to recreate this method and just get rid of all the stuff inside of it. And we'll redo this with map. So with map, we've got our numbers array being sent in. So I'm going to call numbers.map. And for each num, I need to transform it. And with map, With map, all I need to do is do the transformation in the block num.toS. And if I comment this out and run this, we're still getting that nice array of strings. So map is meant to create a new array with the transformed values. So it looks a lot shorter than this each, right? Really the only things they have in common is like this piece here. With map, we don't need the accumulator. We don't need to shovel that transformation in anywhere. We just say, hey, numbers, go ahead and transform yourselves. to your string versions. Okay. Now, there is a pretty big gotcha with map, and that is that map will create a new array, and it will send to that new array whatever the return value of your block is. So in this case, the return value of my block is my number to string. So under the hood, map is saying, okay, cool. I'm going to, as I iterate over these numbers, I'm creating a new array and I'm sending each number to string to that new array. So under the hood, this is literally what is happening. This each is literally what is happening under the hood. Map is just a very specific tool that we use to accomplish exactly this pattern. Yeah, Jahara.
So thinking about our recent chat about scope, knowing that map has now changed that array, what scope do we have that brand new array exists? And is it a permanent change, or is it only a change within the scope of that method? Like, where does it go?
Yeah. So it's actually not changing the array. It is actually creating a new array. So if I put, let me do this. Let me throw a pry in here so we can play around. That's what I wanted. Let me require pry, and let me throw a pry here. And actually, yeah, let me throw, oops, that's not what I wanted. Hotkeys. Okay, cool. Let me throw a pry here, and let's run this and let's see what, oops, geez, Louise. Okay, cool. So if I'm in this method, after I've run this map, if I look at what numbers is, what do we think it's going to be? Is it going to be an array of integers or an array of strings? Give me like, oh, number 1 if you think it's going to be an array of integers, or a 2 if you think it's going to be an array of strings. Give me a fist if you're just like, I don't want to answer this. All right, cool. We've got some guesses. So numbers is an array of integers. So what is going on here? Let's go back to our notes. So I said the return value of map is going to be an array of the same length as the original array. I could amend this and say a new array. Okay, map is actually creating a new array. It's not changing the original array. It's creating a new array. Now, in this example, do I have any ability at this binding to call that new array? No, I'm seeing some shaking heads. At this point in this example, if I'm inside this method, I can't call this new array, which in this case doesn't really matter because I just want the method itself to give me this new array. So I'm letting the map just do its job. But if I do want to call this new array again, I can assign it to a variable like this and say number strings is equal to numbers.map do num.toS end. And now if I exit and run this again, now I have both my original numbers array and my number strings array. So map creates a new array of the same length as the original array. Joey.
I might be missing something, but it feels like we essentially accomplished the exact same thing. You had to create a collector of some sort to drop in the new one. Isn't it essentially the same as the longer method up top? Because you had to create a new collector to drop in the modified or the transformed action.
I don't have to. I created this variable just to show more clearly in our pry
okay.
session that these are actually two different arrays. So I don't have to. This will still give me, if I just print my stringify, it will still give me that new array, because remember the return value of a method. So this method stringify, the return value is going to be the last line of code run. And the last line of code is like the ending of this map. And so the last line is whatever this map is returning, that's the return value of this method.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, if I need to use the return value of this map in this same method somewhere else, then I do need to assign it to a variable so that I can like have something to grab and move around.
Got it.
All right, I want to do a thing here. What do I want to put here? Map is fun. All right, cool. If I run, oops, okay, for some reason that's not working. There we go. If I run this method, what do we think is going to be output to the terminal? Just think to yourself, just hold that assumption or that guess in your brain for a little bit. When I try and print stringify 1, 2, 3, oops, with this method, what am I going to see in the terminal? All right, let's see. Let's see if this meets your expectations. Can I get like a thumbs up, thumbs down? Like, this was surprising to me, thumbs up. Thumbs down, like, nope, that's totally 100% what I expected. Cool. I see a lot of side thumbs. I like it. Yeah, so this is the gotcha of map. And that is the new array will be, the new array will be, the new array's elements will be the return value of the block for each of the original array's elements. Ugh, that's a terrible sentence. Let's break this down. So what is map doing? Map is creating a new array, and it is going to always give us back an array of the same length as the original. And so what map is doing is saying, okay, cool, for these numbers, you want me to do some stuff and send it to an array. So the first thing you're asking me to do is num.toS. Great, did it. The next thing you're asking me to do is create this string, map is fun. Cool, did it. Now what do I send to that new array? I'm going to send the return value of this block. So the return value of this block is the last line of code run, and the last line of code run is map is fun. So that is what is going to go into the new array. So for each number, I'm going to send to the array, map is fun. Okay. Yeah, Khan.
Hey, thank you. So in your each method, you had a number underscore strings as like a bucket to hold your variables, your modified array. So you said on line 11 that you don't actually have to have a variable stored to the results of a map. I understand that, but then my question is, where, if I wanted to reference or call back the result of what happens on line 11, am I just calling the stringify method with the results that I want to? Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, if I want to reference the result of this map, in this version of the world, I just call that method, and that will give me the results of the map. if I need to reference the result of the map somewhere like in this method, then I would need to
Oh
assign
yeah,
this map to a variable.
right.
Now inside this method, I can like do something to my strings. So it sort of depends on where you need to access that information.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say most of the time, you're going to be doing something like this, where you want a method to return a map or some other enumerable. Okay, so the big gotcha with map is whatever the return value of this map is going to be, that is what is sent to the new array. So if I have map is fun down here, I'm going to get map is fun, map is fun, map is fun. If I have like Megan is amazing, I'm just going to get like Megan is amazing, Megan is amazing, Megan is amazing. If I have like nil, I'm going to get a bunch of nils. Okay, so the thing you put in the block is what is going to come out the other side. If I want numbers to string to come out the other side, that's what I put in my block. Cool. All right. That is map. I think I want to keep going. Unless there are other questions about map. Maybe I'll just pause for a sec. Any other questions about map? Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, so sorry, this kind of touches on what Khan was saying, but let's just say you were going to use stringify in another method, like right below it for whatever reason. So you would just put stringify. Would you also have to carry the argument with it, or could you just do stringify? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if I then had a method that was like, let's call this back to integers. And I want it to like get my stringified numbers. I'll come back to that, and then like call each on that and like do some stuff to it. I still need to give stringify some information. So if I try and run this back to integers, I'm gonna get an error. Do you know what error I'm gonna get? Or does anyone think
Yeah, it would
that
say
they know?
wrong number of arguments. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, it's gonna say wrong number of arguments. Given 0, expected 1. I gave stringify 0 arguments, I expected 1. So yeah, if I call another method, I need to call it in the way that it's built.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Any other questions about map so far? All right, great. Let's go ahead and talk about, I was going to talk about find next, but I actually think that I want to talk about find all next. So let me move this down and let's talk about find all. So find all is used, how did I do this? Yep. Find all is used when we need a subset of a collection based on specific criteria. So this is like, I've got a collection of muffins and I only want the blueberry ones. I've got a collection of cats and I only want the kittens. I've got a collection of numbers and I only want the even ones. So find all gets a subset of a collection. The syntax is super similar to map. It is, if we do a little Ruby code in here, we're going to have our collection and ask it to find all. And for each element, we're going to give it some criteria. Okay. And then the return value of find all is going to be an array, a new array that is almost always of a shorter length than the original. We're trying to get a subset. So almost always, I'm going to say like 99.99% of the time, find all is going to give you an array that is shorter than the original array. Fewer elements, getting a subset. Okay. Map gives us an array of the same length. Find all gives us an array of a shorter length. We're getting a subset. All right, cool. So what does this look like? Let's do, let's see. I'm going to, do I want to delete some of this? I'll leave it up here. Let's go ahead and let's say we need a method that like gets only the, I hate this example, but it's the only thing I can think of right now. Oh, actually, I got a better example. Let's create a method that's going to get long names, and it's going to take an array of names. And I'm going to do this with each first, just to show you sort of what we're aiming for. So if I want all the long names, if I'm using each, I need some sort of accumulator. And then I want to say, okay, names for each of you, for each name, if your length is, let's say, greater than 3, then let's go ahead and capture that name in our long names array. And let's return all of our long names. And to see if that works, let's try and print out get long names. And let's give it the array of Megan and Mike and Bob. And let's see what happens. Hopefully I don't have something weird in there. All right, cool. Let me clear that out so it's easier to see. Great. So we've got an array. It's 2 elements long, so it's shorter than our original array. And it's only the names that are longer than 3 characters. Cool. With me so far? Great. Okay, so we can do this with each, but there's this fancy find all enumerable that we can use, and it looks like this. If we say get long names, the return value is going to be a new array, so we don't need the accumulator because the return value is going to be that new array. So I can just start by saying, hey names, find all of you where the name length is greater than 3. And if I comment this out just to make it super clear which one we're using, I should still get Megan and Mike. So find all, what you put in the block is the criteria for the elements that you want. I want all the names whose length is greater than 3. This is the criteria for the elements that I want. So instead of having to do this, if the name is greater than 3, then shovel it in, find all does all that for me. It says, if this thing, if this criteria is truthy, go ahead and store that element. questions so far? Yeah, Andrew. Isn't Andrew speaking? I cannot hear an Andrew.
I am sorry.
It's okay.
If I want to have, let's say I want I want it to include any name that is has a length of a 3 or which ends in an E. And I want it to include either of those. Do I have to like do it like with an if then statement where it's one line, or can I like have multiple? Can I have like each condition be its own line? Like,
Oh, yeah, this is the way that I would do it. You cannot have each condition be its own line. This is going to be fun. What do we think the return value of this is going to be? When I run this with Megan, Mike, and Bob, who is going to be in the resulting array? Does any brave soul want to say out loud what you believe is going to happen?
my guess would be
Mike?
just Mike.
Megan, Mike.
Cool. I love it. Lots of brave souls. Just Mike. Here's the gotcha. Find all iterates over each element. And what it does is it's like, okay, cool. I'm iterating. I'm going to start with Megan. So I'm sort of like holding Megan in my hand. And then I run this block. And if the return value of this block is anything other than false or nil, if it's truthy, if it's anything other than false or nil, I'm going to send Megan to the new array. Now I'm going to move to Mike, holding Mike in my hand. If the return value of this block is truthy, I'm going to send Mike to the new array. So what's happening here is with this with these two lines, first find all is saying, okay, is the length greater than 3? Okay, for Megan, that's true. Does the name end in E? For Megan, that's false. The last thing I did was come up with a false. Megan's out of here. Don't want her. Then we do that for Mike. Greater than 3, true. Ends with an E, true. Okay, yep, great. It's not doing both of these. It's not saying this and this or this or this. It's just like running each line. And if at the end we come out with a true or a truthy value, anything other than false or nil, we're gonna send that name into the new array. So let me do this. What do we think this new array is going to be? What do we think this new array is going to be? Just think to yourself for a little bit. We've got find all. First, we're saying name not length greater than 3. Then we've got a 0. What is this new array going to look like? Okay, brave souls, if you'd like to guess, you can unmute yourself and guess what you think it's going to be.
Empty or an error?
Empty or an error?
Maybe.
Nil.
I'm going to guess empty, or because I'm guessing that 0 does not have a value of true, and therefore every time it runs, it will just say, well, it's not true.
Well, isn't that logical? Let's see. 0 is truthy. Yeah. So find all is looking for this. Find all will like assume that you want the element it's holding on to as long as this block returns anything other than false or nil. So if we have 0 in here, we don't get 3 zeros. We get just everyone, because 0 is a thing. 0 is real. If we said like nil, now we will get an empty array, because nil will always be falsy. If we did something like a string of nil, a string is not nil or false, so we get all the elements. Now, this really comes into play when you accidentally do something like this. Let's say I wanted all the names that start with the letter M. So name at the first letter equal M. Okay, cool. This works. And what we often see happen, what I often do, is I will accidentally only put one equal sign in here. And it will now give us, that's fun. Now it gives us all the names, and Bob is now Mob. Okay, so it didn't error out. It's not like, hey, didn't you want to do a comparison in here? It's just like, yep, I'm going to assign this value to a new value, and that's a truthy operation. So there you go. Okay, this is like where that gotcha really comes into play. So you got to be super careful with find all that you're actually doing the last thing you're doing in here is a comparison, so that you're getting like a true or false value. So, oh yeah, did someone have a question?
Yeah, sorry, Megan. So
No, you're good.
for find all, it will do reassignment if you instruct it inside the block with your unless you're doing a comparison. So it will.
Yep.
It will. Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah, computers will do what you tell them, even when you're telling them to do a stupid thing.
Yeah.
What was I about to say? I forget. Okay. Yeah, so that is the gotcha with find all. So find all will send the element to the new array anytime the return value of the block is truthy. And what I mean by truthy is anything other than false or nil. So that's the gotcha, and it'll get you. This is basically just a lesson that's like, hey, here's some problems that your future self are really gonna have a hard time with. Have fun. All right. Any other questions about find all so far? All right. This last one that I wanted to go over today is really similar to find all. So I think I'm just going to push forward and try and end this lesson a little early and give you all some Ruby exercises to practice these things. Does that sound okay? If anyone like desperately needs a bio break, it's totally okay. You can just tell me like, hey, I need a pom. But if no one says anything, I'm just going to keep jibber jabbering at you. Okay, cool. All right. The next one is find. And we use find when we want to get the first element of a collection that meets a specific criteria. So the difference here is instead of getting a subset of elements, we just want the first element that meets a specific criteria, which means that the return value is going to be the element it'll be, let's see, it'll be one of the elements in the collection. So if it's a collection of strings, it'll be a string. If it's a collection of integers, it will be an integer. If it's a collection of muffins, it will be a muffin. It will be one of the elements in the collection, or if nothing is found, it'll be nil. Okay. And the syntax is actually exactly the same as find all, except it's called find. Find, and we want to find an element based on some criteria. It's a little prettier. All right, so what does that look like in practice? If instead of getting long names, we just want to get a long name, instead of find all, we would use find. And what do we think the return value of this get long name is going to be? What do we think that return value is going to be? If you want, you can throw it in the chat. What do we think the return value is going to be if I ask it to get long name? Cool, great, I like it. Hopefully we get Megan. Megan is the first element that begins with an M. Cool. We will never get Mike because Megan is always first. Always Megan, always Megan. And then find also has the same gotchas as find all. So if we reorganize our array here, if we like move, oops, if we move Bob to the front and say like, Megan is the best. Ah, crap, we get Bob. Because Megan is the best is a string. So find is going to give us the first element where the return value of the block is truthy. So if we do something like this, we will always get the first element in our array because the string is always truthy. If we do something like this, where we like do the comparison and then nil, we will get nil because nil is always falsy. So no elements will be found. Any questions about find? Yeah, Kevin.
Oh, so just to clarify, so the find all will return, like if you're checking an array, it will return an array of smaller size, and the find will always just return a single element that it counters first?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Thank you.
Yep, find all will always return an array. If find all doesn't find anything, it will return an empty array, which is still an array of a shorter length, but just want to be super clear. If find all doesn't find anything that matches that criteria, it will return an empty array. If find doesn't find anything that matches the criteria, it will return nil. Cool. All right. Yep. A couple other things that I want to mention. If you go to the Ruby docs for enumerables, oh, dangerous extensions, weird. Ruby docs, enumerables. If you take a look at, like, let's look at map, for example. If you take a look at the map documentation, you'll see in the like little example block that it says like .map and then also .collect. Weird. So a lot of these enumerables have multiple names. So map is sometimes called collect. Collect and map are basically the same. Find also has a synonym. Find all also has a synonym. It's not super important that you know exactly what those synonyms are. It's just important to know that sometimes you'll see something like a select or a select all, or I can't remember. Sometimes these enumerables have different names. I will always use map, find, and find all because I think that they make the most sense. But just a note that sometimes they have different names. The other thing that I wanted to show you or touch on is, let's look at what's a good one to look at? Let's look at this count. Yeah, okay. So sometimes when I look at documentation for a thing, I'm like, I don't understand what they're doing here. Like, what is this count with the curly brace? Maybe I don't know single line syntax. Sometimes documentation can be really difficult to read through. One thing that I suggest students do is if you're looking at the documentation for a method and you see something in the example that you don't really understand, it's sometimes helpful to look at the documentation for a method that you do understand, that you have used in the past, to sort of try and translate between the two. So maybe I'm learning about count for the first time and I'm having a hard time figuring out what this example is telling me to do. But maybe I have used map before, and so I can go look at the documentation for map, and I can see like, okay, if I take 1 to 4 and map it and I get this array with all this stuff, I can sort of like translate, oh, okay, when they're doing these like curly braces, that must be like some single line syntax, something. Reading documentation is hard. It is definitely a skill, and it's gonna feel like really uncomfortable for a while, probably, if you're anything like me. So that's just like one thing that I find useful is like when I'm reading about something new, also reading about things that I already know how to use so that I can try and make those like documentation lingo comparisons. So just like FYI, maybe it helps you, maybe it doesn't, who knows. So that's one thing that I wanted to share. Also, these enumerables docs, like there's a ton of enumerables. Like I said before, we won't go through all of them, but there are a ton of them. What I would suggest that you all do, if you have not already, is this would be a great time to dig into the Ruby exercises. So let's go to mod 1. I think these are in exercises. Yes. So in the Ruby exercises, and again, if you haven't started working through these, highly, highly, highly recommend. No one that I have ever met has ever said, I wish I didn't do the Ruby exercises. So in these Ruby exercises, and I'm probably gonna mess this up, but let me just see. In the enumerables, yes, great, perfect. So in the Ruby exercises, in the enumerables directory, there are some exercises 1 and exercises 2. And in here, you'll see things like this map pattern test and map test. And the way that I would do these is I would always start with the pattern test one. So each of these is like named for an enumerable. So map, find, count, reduce. These are all enumerables that you can practice. And I would start with the map pattern test. And what this does is it asks you to do the pattern of mapping, so to transform things, but using each. So it starts off with a fully formed test. This runs and passes all good. And then it sort of like asks you to to start adding your own code and like taking more away, and you add your own code. So you do like the pattern test using each so that you know how to do it with each. And then you can do the actual like map test or enumerable test where you actually use that enumerable. So I said at the beginning, but I'll say it again, all of these enumerables are tools that we use for specific iteration problems. Each is a tool that we can use for any iteration problem. All these enumerables are basically like each plus. So anything you can do with an enumerable, you can do with each. And actually under the hood, a lot of these are built on each. Like if you looked at the source code for Ruby, it's gonna, like a lot of these will actually use each inside of them. Let's see, I think that's what I had to say about that. Okay, yeah. Does anyone not know where these Ruby exercises are? Do you want me to walk through how to get to these again? I'll just do that. So if we go to the backend mod 1 page, which hopefully you have been to before, hopefully, and scroll down to resources. In the exercises link, there are some Ruby exercises. And this, this repo, you'll just want to clone it down. And there is a README with some instructions on like how to get started with the directory. And then inside like each, God, I hate using the word each when I'm talking about enumerables. Inside every directory or most of them, there will also be a README that will walk you through like how to do some of them. And then a lot of times you'll have like a recommended order. And I would say for the most part, like do the recommended order. It'll help you like level up, I would say. Yeah, so that's that. Khan, did you have a question?
I did, yeah, thank you. So is it just better if I have a specific use case to use the enumerables as
Yeah.
opposed to using each?
Is it better? Okay, here's another opinion. This is an opinion piece. I would say most programmers, most Rubyists would tell you that it is better to use the enumerable than to use each. What I would say is, as a Mod 1 student, my hope and dream for you all is that you can tackle any iteration problem with each. And also, you have a handful of enumerables in your pocket that you can use when the time is right. Ruby is a really wonderful language. It gives us tools for these very specific iteration problems. Not every language has these kinds of tools. So if you come out of Mod 1 and you can use map and find all and reduce and max and all these fancy enumerables, but you can't figure out how to do it with each, that is like the least good enumerables outcome for me, because that means that like you can Ruby, but you can't necessarily program. I want you to have more transferable skills of like, okay, if I'm dropped into, I don't know, some other silly language like JavaScript, and I don't have all these fancy enumerables, can I survive? Do I have like the raw skills to be able to iterate over a collection?
So then I would probably want to, for Mod 1, focus on just making sure I have a good understanding of each while working with enumerables, but I think I should be working with each and making sure I got a good solid grasp on that. Is that a good mindset to have?
Yep, I think that's a great mindset. And so, and that's why I really love these Ruby exercises, because it does have you do this with each. Now do it with the enumerable, and like ideally you get to the end of mod 1 and you've done all these exercises with each and with their corresponding enumerable, then that's like, that's where I want you to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, so the like very beginning of your question, which is better, each or the enumerable, that really depends on the developer you're talking to. Because I have such strong feelings about you all learning each, I use each a lot. It's my favorite. It can do anything I want it to do. I don't have to think about all these other fancy enumerables. I use each. I would say I'm in the minority opinion on that. Okay, any other questions? All right. I think I've seen some questions come in through the backend code help channel, so I'm going to take some time to review that. If you have other questions that you want to throw in there, either on the scope thread or the enumerables thread, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I will stop talking and let you all go. What do you have this afternoon? I do not know. You know what? You're adults. I trust you to check your own calendars. You've got something this afternoon, and I expect you to be there.
It's the project help sessions.
Oh yeah, project check-ins. Oh, I was gonna say something about that. Okay, one last thing, and then I promise I will shut up. These project check-ins, when you open up the calendar invite, you will each be assigned to a specific time and a specific instructor. So please take a look at like what time and which instructor you're gonna be with. Our Zoom links either are in there or they will be in there very shortly. We run these first project check-ins in a group. So we'll be like asking you to like share some code potentially and like ask questions to a group because we want to learn from each other, not just like one-on-one. And also time is an issue. So this is not like a, hey, everyone should be at this exact spot. And if you're not, we're gonna come at you with sticks. This is just like a, hey, let's all like chat about this project together with no judgment. Cool. Okay. Now I'll stop talking. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording. I will let y'all go. I will hang out here for the next like 15 minutes while I sort of answer these questions in the thread. Stop.